Hello everybody, and with any luck we are live. Gareth Evans is here, Frank Griffith is here, Mike Coates is here, Ian Bradley is here, I'm here, and we'll be back after we've heard Duke Ellington. Right, hello everybody, and as you can tell, we are live. That was Duke Ellington's arrangement, I guess, of Lullaby of Birdland by George Shearing from 1960. Take 4, I believe. Just did this a moment ago when we weren't actually quite on. But it's great to be here, isn't it, everybody?
Yeah.
Yes! Wonderful. Okay. Cross fingers, because this is live. We're not used to doing this live, but, we'll give it a go. We've only done it 50 times, haven't we, Frank?
It seems like 100.
I know. So anyway, thanks so much for tuning in if you have. And if you're not live now, you can watch us later. Lucky you. What wonderful people here. Look at this. We've got Gareth Evans. He's the editor of our magazine Blue Light, which I don't have to hand. But anyway, I'm sure he does. Or maybe he doesn't, actually, because he's away, aren't you? You're...
I am, yeah. I did bring one with me, and it's going to be a working holiday, so I could be doing a bit of editing when I can fit in.
Best source. So, Gareth, thanks so much for being here. Frank Griffith, of course, stalwart and my compatriot and whatever on UL for the last 2.5 years or so.
Yep.
Clarinetist and band leader and Liverpudlian.
Saxophonist, too.
Ian Bradley, our editor before last of Blue Light, and presently enjoying his retirement. But lovely to see you, Ian. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yeah.
And of course, our chairman, Michael Coates, up there in Sheffield. Hello, Mike.
Can't hear you. It's gone quiet again.
And we are live. I hope. Okay, never mind. We'll sort that out in a moment. Ian, so you brought some records along. Tell us about this. We're going to have a little bit of a thread going through today's programme. It's not going to touch every base, but...
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the clarinetist thread to me.
Oh, yes.
So the couple of tracks I picked are both on the clarinet theme, and one particular soloist, Jimmy Hamilton, who I think actually is one of my favourite soloists in the orchestra, regardless of the instrument. So it was quite easy to pick a couple of, I suppose, fairly minor tracks, but just favourite Ellington pieces. I think Jimmy Hamilton took the clarinet chair eventually from Barney Bigard via Chauncey Horton briefly. But I suppose Ellington being Ellington, he was never asked to replace Bigard's style. So it was something, to quote Monty Python, completely different, I think. And I enjoy Jimmy Hamilton's modern style, really. I suppose he's compared most frequently to Benny Goodman, being the sort of post-New Orleans style, but a great modernist, I think, and a great virtuoso as well. And it's hard to imagine pieces like Air Conditioned Jungle or The Tattooed Bride without his input. The couple of pieces I've chosen are not, I suppose, not quite in that league of difficulty, but the first one's Silk Lace from the Afrobosa album in 1963 is a good example, I think, of his sort of liquid kind of style. I read somewhere, so I can't claim this observation for myself, but he plays the melody really quite straight, and that is really the only way for it to work on this kind of a tune. I think if a more jazz-oriented player had tried to work with the melody, it wouldn't work quite as well. So it's from Afrobosa, so there are those interesting sort of Latin rhythms behind it, and it's nudged along the solo by the other reed players. And as I say, he plays the melody straight. There's all sorts of interesting corners. He just has the skill, I feel, to explore. So that's the first track I chose. If we can play that one, Anthony. So it's also known as Kayleen, I think, which I believe is some reference to Celine, the female name, which knowing Ellington maybe is no great surprise, and celestial and to do with heaven, as well as, I suppose, you think...
So it's Kayleen with a C, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah. So there's all sorts of things, I think, going on in the title, never mind the solo, and it's Ellington's composition, I believe, his arrangement as far as I know, and it's from Afrobosa.
Frank's gone, but he'll be back, hopefully. Ian.
Yes. Oh, right, thanks for playing that. Good. As I say, it's sort of straight down the middle. Some of what Jimmy Hamilton had to offer the orchestra in terms of his playing. And I must admit, in my ignorance, actually, it was Uptown Lockdown that drew my attention to his work on tenor. I've not really acknowledged that or been all of that aware, other than from time to time thinking, oh, that's probably not Paul Gonsalves on the... So that was an education. I think you played an extended version of Higher Sue, and it's quite a shock to discover how different his playing is on the tenor to the clarinet, which is much more sort of rough and ready, and I think people say slightly R&B style. So the second track I've chosen gives us a chance to hear him on the tenor, but he also takes the final sort of ascending chorus on clarinet at the end, and you realise there's maybe not that much of a difference to travel. He did tend to play the Goodman-esque, more classically orientated type of solo, but he really kind of lets go right at the end of this track, which is from the Blues in Orbit album. I think only because once I started thinking about choosing a couple of these tracks and picking them, Honeysuckle Rose was the first standard I think he was associated with at Carnegie Hall, the 43 concert at the end of the year. And I think that was retooled in the mid-50s for the Ellington 55 album. And he shows the much more extemporizing side of his playing there, I think, quite a much wilder approach than we're used to hearing. But we get to hear him on tenor saxophone first of all, and then clarinet at the end. The number starts with Johnny Hodges on alto, and the trombonists Matthew G and Britt Woodman are in there somewhere, and some trumpet from Ray Nance. But it's Jimmy Hamilton on the tenor and on the clarinet at the end of the piece.
The Swingers Jump from Blues in Orbit. Frank's back. Hello, Frank.
Yeah, I'd just like to support what Ian was saying about his contrasting style on saxophone to his clarinet, and more importantly, his contrasting style of saxophone compared to Paul Gonsalves. Now, Paul Gonsalves was a much more modern player than Jimmy, and he had a very different sound. It was a kind of a sinewy, kind of softer sound. It was like, in a way, more linear than Jimmy, in as much as he played kind of in a modern Lester Young style. Now, Lester Young, of course, was a very innovative player in the 30s and certainly through the 40s, in that he was playing really strongly kind of chromatic lines, not in the style of Charlie Parker, but as people might know, Lester was a very big influence on Charlie Parker. He was about 11 years older, okay? He was born in 1909. Charlie Parker was born in 1920. But Charlie used to hear him as a kid, as a teenager in Kansas City, because Lester played a lot in Kansas City with Count Basie, who was based in Kansas City for a while. So I find that interesting that there's a lot of closeness between the two forces early on in Bird's career. And there was also the fact that Paul recorded a lot with players in England. People must know that he recorded with Tubby Hayes and Jimmy Duker and Stan Tracy in the 1960s when he was over here working with Ellington. And people, a slight aside, might be aware that Tubby Hayes stepped in Paul's shoes once with Ellington because Paul was, let's say, indisposed. Paul enjoyed a drink and sometimes was not able to play, and so there was Tubby playing with Ellington at presumably the Royal Festival Hall or something. People probably know about this already, so I won't profess to have all the facts right on that one. And he made some quintet albums with another sax player. I think it was Sonny Stitt, possibly. Does that sound right? Does anyone know Paul's small group recordings in the 60s?
Yeah, there's an Impulse album. It's Salt and Pepper, I think.
Yeah, that's the one. Very good. Yeah. And he also made his own albums. And of course, he played the guitar as well. And he was recorded on guitar, wasn't he? Was Paul Gonsalves, which we heard on Ian's Paul Gonsalves show, but seems like ages ago, but that was a good show.
It was quite a while ago. I imagine it's still on this channel if people wish to go back and have a listen to it.
Yes, it was a great show, as are all of Ian's and Gareth's, of course, and Mike's, and sometimes mine.
Who knows?
But
sometimes.
The thing I'm sorry I got off of Jimmy Hamilton. I wanted to point out that I have a theory that Jimmy Hamilton developed his style because in the 1940s, before he joined Ellington, that kind of Louis Jordan style, Sam Butera, that rhythm and blues tenor style was really popular. And I wouldn't be surprised if Paul got a lot of session work because he could play that style. And that it stayed on when he was with Ellington. And what a great contrast to Gonsalves, because you wouldn't mix them up. A lot of big bands, you can get confused as to which tenor player it is, because they play too similar. So I thought it was just the job. Didn't Paul play the solo on Imagine My Frustration? Imagine My Frustration. Does that sound familiar? Everyone's familiar with Ella's recording of that, of course, right? Just nod politely. But I'm pretty sure that's him on the solo. And what better soloist for that tune? Because that was quite a, rhythm and bluesy song. Not the most, not what you'd expect for Strayhorn. Okay. So, but Jimmy, just to point out on his clarinet playing, he had superior control of the clarinet to any of the Ellingtonians. Now, I'm not saying that great tone and great technique make a person a great star, but the parts that Duke and Billy wrote for, Paul Jimmy were very virtuosic, and other clarinet players wouldn't have been up to it. I mean, on the track, hopefully we'll get time to play today. It's a
plenty of
clarinet.
time.
Good. Plenty of obligato clarinet, and I think many of you were at the was it the 2019 conference at Birmingham Birmingham College?
18.
Yeah, that sounds right. Sorry, yeah. BCU, Birmingham
City University.
Is that right?
Yeah,
that's right.
And the really fine band led there by Jeremy Price
at the conservatory.
At the conservatory,
the Royal Birmingham Conservatory,
around the corner
at the BCU up there. Yes.
Those of you that were able to attend that will probably remember that Birmingham was going through an extremely complicated and difficult kind of refurbishment. Then I don't know if people remember that.
Well, the whole city.
But it took a half an hour for the bus to go like 2 blocks when you could walk it in about 30 seconds, that sort of thing. That's how bad the construction was. And despite that, the band played famously. And the band leader, who I know quite well, Jeremy Price, kindly, or maybe not so kindly, invited me to play a number with the band on clarinet, which was, I'm pretty sure, I'm sure people will remember, not my playing, but the chart. It was, I think it was called The Opener, and it was from 1958. Does anyone remember that piece? It's a clarinet feature throughout.
Vaguely.
No? I might have the title wrong, sorry. But a remarkable thing about that conference, I think, of course, was the amount of live music we heard. And the band really did a great job there. And I believe that they did a lot of lesser known Ellington pieces, maybe not to us, but it wasn't just, the classics. And so good on Jeremy and the good offices of BCU for making it happen. We've all been to conferences, especially the ones around COVID time, where there was virtually no live music. And to have an Ellington conference and very little or no live music is pretty much, illegal. So there we go. But yes, a distinctive different sound and style on clarinet, which I find quite amazing, really. It's almost like his swing and more kind of post-bop language came out on the clarinet, but not on the saxophone, which is, I find a bit strange. But maybe he was multiple personalities in a good way, that he could distinguish his whole presence and style just by which horn he had in his mouth.
He was told, I think, that the job was doubling on clarinet and tenor. And I don't want to take away from anything you're playing later, Frank, but tenor wasn't the saxophone that he favoured, but I don't know much about him before Ellington. But I presume that goes with the territory when you're in a big band, that you're expected to be a multi-reedist. I know Hodges and Gonsalves weren't, but because you were in the Glenn Miller Orchestra.
Yeah, I was.
Frank,
yeah, I had to play equal amount of
the entire reed section. Is that generally how it works?
This is what I played every day.
No, we don't know. That didn't come over at all.
That was a tune that
what was
Glenn
that,
wrote.
Frank?
A brilliant song by Glenn Miller. He was actually a good composer, and I just want to say that Glenn Miller made a lot of recordings that didn't include In the Mood and Chattanooga and Moonlight and String of Pearls, and they sound to me like Ellington recordings. They really do. Great swinging arrangements, lots of solos. Presumably they were before the war, so they probably weren't that long of tracks. I assume they were still 78s then, yeah. But it's just a whole different part of Glenn Miller, and I'm sure he was very influenced by Ellington, actually. And Ellington wrote in that style too. He did, didn't he? With the clarinet lead over the top of the four saxes, those really high voicings that really shone like brilliantly in the acoustics. So I think that was a bit of a mutual admiration society, you know.
Did he do In the Mood? Ellington in the.
He did, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ellington 55 again, I think.
On this album.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is a CD of two albums that I believe were recorded in 1961. Okay, within maybe months of each other.
Is In the Mood on? I thought it was 50.
It's earlier. Yeah, there's one.
Yeah, that was Capital.
We played.
I don't think it could have been that early in the 50s, though, was it?
I think if you refer back to our YouTube channel, I think maybe the program decades ago with Martin Hathaway, I think we may have even played it.
Yeah.
All right.
I would have to, there's a lot of Duke Ellington, isn't there?
Well, the thing is, he took all of the great big band hits and did his own versions of them.
Did we play the Glenn Miller version? I think we might have done.
No, he did his own version, but it was very close to Glenn Miller's version.
Wasn't it an album called Will the Big Bands Never Come Back or something like that?
Well, this is not the proper album. It's just called Recollections of the Big Band Era. Okay. But yes, Mike, that was the original title. He did Rhapsody in Blue, Goodbye, which we'll be hearing. That was Gordon Jenkins' theme for Benny Goodman's band. Sentimental Journey, Tommy Dorsey, right? Maybe? Or no, Les Brown, of course. Yeah. When It's Sleepy Time Down South, Woodchopper's Ball, Woody Herman, Smoke Rings, Artistry and Rhythm, which was Kenton, Tuxedo Junction, which was Erskine Hawkins.
Erskine Hawkins, 20th Century Gabriel.
Actually, it was Glenn Miller who had a big hit with Tuxedo Junction, wasn't it?
It was.
Auld Lang Syne,
but it wasn't
by someone you might not have heard of called Guy Lombardo, who is the king of cheese. Something called Sira Ribibin. So I can't say
Sira
that.
Ribibin, yes.
Chant of the Weed, which was 1920s.
Don Redman.
Sorry, who was that?
Don Redman.
Don Redman's band. Yeah, a leader who was contemporaneous with Ellington, presumably. Who, of course, didn't have a great career with that Ellington did. For Dancers Only, which was, I think, Jimmy Lunsford. I'm sorry to read the list. That's really boring. But Christopher Columbus, which was also recorded by Jimmy Lunsford, wasn't it? So I find that album quite good, quite interesting because of his take on these great standards.
Very good.
But at no point does Ellington take the Michael out of him, or send him up, or try to be too Ellingtonian, if that makes sense. He celebrates the original spirit and style of the arrangements.
Yes, so for reprise,
brilliant.
Somebody shouted in there Capitol, and yes, apparently it was recording for Capitol. That's excellent. Which was that album? Gosh, there's so much Ellington. I don't know.
Ellington 55, that one. Anthony.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, sorry if I'm off with my dates, but it sounded like slightly more modern Ellington.
And then what happened is about sort of 62, 3, whenever it was, Ellington recorded a whole lot of these pieces, and they put out an album on reprise called something like...
Yeah, Will the Big Bands Ever Come Back? Yeah.
And then about a decade later, they put out the rest of the material as Recollections of the Big Band Era, something like that. Oh, God, we're not playing any of that, though. Well, we could play. I've got a couple of...
Well, I've got Goodbye. That's
let's play Good. We are playing some of it. Yes, thank you, Frank. Goodbye.
Well, that's the only one that I could have chosen other ones. I'm sorry I didn't, but that's just one of my favorite tracks from that from all of Ellingtonia.
Right. Let's hear it.
And Billy wrote the arrangement, and Jimmy has got a completely written part. It's not any improvising in it. Which is interesting because it does sound improvised, but Billy, with his perhaps more than Ellington, classical music influences from his school days, listening to Debussy and Ravel, really integrated the clarinet and, well, all instruments, but especially clarinet, because one associates a clarinet perhaps more with classical music than jazz. And I think the clarinet...
we do nowadays, yes.
Has been derided or compromised
indeed.
because of people's attitude that it's not a proper jazz instrument, compared to saxophone, for example.
Strange.
But people will know that classical saxophone was the thing. It was invented in 1840 or something by Adolphe Sax. And it was just... does anyone know why the saxophone was invented? It's not a joke. It was for the marching bands. Yeah. The German marching bands. Now, Adolphe Sax is a terribly German sounding name, but he was actually Belgian. Yeah. But he fled to Paris, as a young man to be involved in what, was in addition to his, extreme talents as a musician, I should say musical instrument inventor. He also invented other things. Yeah, Adolphe Sax was one of these really amazing figures in history. Yeah, but the point being is that they needed an equivalent sound to a brass instrument that was a woodwind. Yeah,
right.
And they had to, because the parade bands and the marching bands and things like that were a big thing, and as a result, somebody probably said, we need a bigger woodwind sound for the bands. And so the saxophone was born. And then it was called, obviously jazz wasn't really happening in the 19th century, but it wasn't until the 30s, when you think about it, the saxophone took the prominence that it now has today. Even though Coleman Hawkins was playing in the 20s, and Adrian Rollini, Frankie Trambauer, Frankie Teschmaker, all very fine saxophonists. I don't think it really became a solo instrument until just after that. Or I could be wrong about that.
Well, there was Sydney on the soprano. I guess that would be there.
Absolutely. Sidney Bechet, who was also, of course, an extremely good clarinet player.
Yes, indeed. The archetype. Really,
and he's not celebrated enough on the clarinet. But just before we go on, sorry, one of the names that Michael suggested to feature, to mention at least, is Russell Procope, who I believe was in the 20s band. And I don't have a lot of his clarinet work, although I will say that he played with the John Kirby Sextet in the late 30s.
And Jerry Roll Morton, I think.
Yes.
Okay.
Is he on Deep Creek?
But I believe he played only clarinet in the Kirby Sextet, right? Yeah. Which was John Kirby, of course, on bass, Billy Kyle on piano, the great Charlie Shavers, and of course Procope on the clarinet. And there was a third horn. It was Shavers, Procope, and somebody else. Does anyone remember who the third horn was?
I'll look it up.
I mean, that's not Ellington, but certainly with the inclusion of Russell Procope, it was a bit Ellingtonian. Because I assume that... Who was it?
Sorry, no. I was going to say something else.
Okay,
carry on, Frank.
But just to say that Russell presumably was still with Ellington when he was working with Kirby, unlike Hodges, who would leave Ellington 2 or 3 times and come back. And apparently a lot of those guys did a bit of, slumming or moonlighting with other bands, which must have been difficult considering Ellington was touring so much at the time. Yeah.
The thing about Russell Procope is I think you'll find that he's, of the 3 people that we're looking at today or thinking about today, Russell Procope is the least well represented in jazz literature. And I'm not speaking of jazz fiction literature. I'm talking about material written about clarinetists. And there is very little written about Russell Procope.
Yeah.
Which is sad, frankly.
It's a crime, really.
Yeah. And perhaps as a society, we might look at championing him a bit more.
Yeah,
I don't know. Anyway,
that's a good point. Was he also a New Englander, like Hodges?
I think so, yeah.
Or was he from New York? He might have been from New York, but I'm just asking because of the frequency of players from places like Brewster, Hyannisport, places on Cape Cod, you know.
The point that Ian brought up, I found quite interesting some few minutes ago, in the sense of all musicians, but particularly saxophonists and clarinet players, being inducted or asked to join a band like the three people we're talking about. Towards the end of his life, Johnny Hodges refused to play soprano saxophone.
That's true, yeah. According to Alan Barnes, yeah.
Particularly, he was asked to play, I think it was second line on the New Orleans suite, and he refused flatly to do it. Which is a pity, because if you listen to Hodges' early work on soprano sax, the work he did was intriguing, eclipsed perhaps by his alto playing over very many years. Personally, I wish he'd not been quite so bloody minded, if I can use the phrase, towards the end, because I would like to have heard Hodges play more soprano sax. But come in. I was just going to say,
he wanted a double fee if he was going to play the soprano. I think he said to Ellington he wanted to be paid for that as well as the alto, and Ellington wouldn't pay him for both. I think.
Typical sax player.
I can quite see that happening. I mean, there is a book to be written on Ellington's relationships with his musicians vis-a-vis the bits of their work that he capitalised on for his own tunes. And especially, and I picked this up certainly from attending one or two of the Ellington conferences when the likes of Jimmy Hamilton was still alive. It seems to me to be a minefield how Ellington actually paid his men. I don't mean in terms of giving them the money, but deciding, because they do this, they get a few more dollars or whatever it may be. There was obviously no union in the Ellington band, put it that way, as far as salaries were
first
concerned.
of all, Mick Carlin's book, which is rather got some differing reviews, shall I say, which was called Rabbit Blues, which I think was published around 2016 or so. And he goes to great length in the book to talk about Hodges and the relationship he had with Ellington, about salaries and those stories about being particular about certain saxophones and stuff. And from what I mean, it's just one person's opinion, but from what I gather, Hodges was the highest paid sideman in the band, which probably would make sense. But you never know with these things, do you? You know. No. So he perhaps that's why he left and came back at least twice.
I would not assume that the financial records of the Ellington organisation are a complete representation of the distribution of payments.
Yeah. But a lot of talk in the book as well about how Johnny contributed so many great pieces to the Ellington Library. Yeah. Which he recorded on his own albums, and thankfully he did his own albums. The Things You Miss is a particularly great song of Johnny's, which I have to say, I think it was written in the early 50s, was very Strayhorn-esque to me, I thought. So he did write some really great pieces. And
when some of his his themes were played. I think this comes from the book you refer to, Frank. When pieces that he considered had been mixed by Ellington, he'd mime counting out money on the stage, and that's the money that he hadn't received or thought he should have received for the lines.
Oh,
Well, I've played. I transcribed that piece, "The Things You Miss," and I've played it a lot on gigs. And I do occasionally get remarks, comments about it, like, "What's that great song? Like a song you'll never forget." And it's very. I'll just paraphrase a few bars, but. Quite a simple melody, but it's just got this loping kind of simplicity and melodicness, if that's a word, to it that just people can't forget it.
Melodicity.
I haven't seen her in years.
No.
But
oh, gosh.
really? Oh, Mike.
There were half a dozen things I was going to say.
My jokes, does Mike? I always like.
I'm sorry, Frank, I didn't catch that.
Well, he says you laugh at my jokes. But yeah, I'm sorry, we're going off of Hamilton.
Oh no, certainly not.
Support Mike's point about Prokop, because he plays some incredible solos on those mid '60s albums on clarinet. Doesn't he?
I've lost it now. But look, hang on. Let me just have a quick.
Prokop, doesn't he, on the clarinet? Doesn't he?
Let me just break in here briefly. So Russell.
Yeah, please do.
Russell Prokop was. Thank you. Russell Prokop was born in New York and raised somewhere in Manhattan. Apparently, I don't know. It says here.
A true New Yorker, yeah.
So Buster Bailey was the third one in the John Kirby band.
Thank you.
Going back, just looking.
So he was on clarinet, that's right,
clarinet.
and Russell was on alto. Yeah.
And also clarinet, Russell on clarinet on that Deep Creek session with Jelly Roll Morton, yes.
Yeah, so
Paul Barnes,
all the sax players.
Paul Barnes, soprano saxophone. I
all the
believe.
sax players had to play good clarinet. I don't suppose Paul ever even owned a clarinet, or maybe he did somewhere in the loft or something, because I don't seem to remember hearing him play it. But maybe he did on some recordings that we don't know about.
Shall we play a recording? Shall we play Goodbye? It's not Goodbye from us. We'll be back.
Yeah. Let me just say,
Yes.
I've talked about it already, but this is one of the more kind of Ellingtonia-esque arrangements on this album. Sorry, it's a CD cover. It's not as impressive as Anthony's rather healthy arsenal of vinyl in his jazz garage.
Yes, in my jazz shed on tour here.
Or garage, as I should say. But it's a real impressionistic arrangement, and I like so many of the Hodges ballads, just completely on the level of Daydream, recorded on And His Mother Called Him Bill. It's just a real tearjerker, that poised tone with a little bit of vibrato, but so much lyrical and richness to it. As I said, as it the guy that wrote the Conrad Chapman said he was the vocalist. He was a vocalist in the band, so to speak. And there's a theory that Ellington didn't have a lot of vocalists from time to time because he had Hodges. Again, that's one person's opinion. That might not be shared by others, but he was the closest thing to a vocalist in the band, I thought. Yeah. He wasn't known for his rapid technique and getting paid by the note, but in fact, this rendition of Goodbye, which is only a few minutes long, tells that story very well.
All right. goodbye.
Yeah, that was, of course, very famous theme written for Benny Goodman's orchestra, and what was also his closing tune at the end of sets and gigs was it. Gordon presumably wrote the arrangement for Goodman's band. Gordon, of course, is probably most associated with Sinatra, having not only arranged many of his albums, I think more the string albums, less of a swinger than, say, Billy May and Nelson Riddle, yeah. But he also, unlike Nelson and Billy May, wrote a lot of great standard tunes. One of which, of course, is This Is All I Ask. He wrote a number of songs for Sinatra, September of My Years, I think, yeah. And Sinatra's last album with Gordon Jenkins was in 1980 called Trilogy. And Gordon wrote an entire disc. In those days, it was albums, of songs. It was an entire LP of new songs for Sinatra to sing on Trilogy. I don't know if people are familiar with the albums. Probably Sinatra's last great album.
When was
before
that?
he started doing 1980.
Right.
I think technically 79, but I think it came out in 80. And
I'll
the
put
rest
it
of
on
the
my list.
the rest of the album are recreations of like slightly more modernized versions of his standard songs, popular songs. And the album, the subtitle of the album is Trilogy, Past, Present, and the Future. And Gordon wrote the entire selection of the selections of the future. So that's quite an accomplishment. And I think he died not long after that, Gordon Jenkins. But anyway, what a great arrangement.
Good
Just one
grief.
chorus of the song, Goodbye.
That is a triple album.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, three albums.
That is
Three
something.
three discs. Yeah.
Oh, I must find that. I must have that. Well, I'd like to listen to it sometime anyway. Right. Oh gosh, wonderful music, and thank you.
So if you have it ready, it might be interesting. Just from my standpoint, to hear what others have to say about Bigard.
Oh.
Mike, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about him, as he was from New Orleans, as are so many Ellingtonians, and his particular stamp, his particular, what he brought to the band that was new at the time.
Well, I can't say that I favour one or other of the three clarinet players. I might just say that thanks to Ian for playing the Swingers Jump, because that's the track that really set the theme for this afternoon's discussion. I think the work, I know this is about Jimmy Hamilton, not about Barney Bigard for the moment, but I think the work that Jimmy Hamilton on clarinet puts into that album, Blues in Orbit, is quite exceptional. It's not just that track, but you're right. The Swingers Jump really underlines the kind of, I think, influence that Benny Goodman had on Jimmy Hamilton. Perhaps not a fashionable thing to say, but he obviously had listened very, very closely to what Benny Goodman had done in earlier years. With Barney Bigard, there is, I believe, with people like Johnny Dodds, to some extent Albert Nicholas, and certainly Barney Bigard, I do believe there is what I would call the New Orleans influence in their playing. And when Bigard played with Ellington, he never lost that particular ability, which in a funny kind of way perhaps didn't help his cause when Ellington, certainly around the 1941 band, 40 and 41 band, really took on the mantle of modernising his music. That's a personal opinion. I'm not suggesting that it's widely held. But certainly when you listen to Ellington's compositions and work after 1940, there is a modern aspect to them, which somehow Barney Bigard didn't fix in the same way. It's very difficult to explain, but you can hear it. What I find particularly upsetting about Barney Bigard in terms of his clarinet playing is not his musicianship, but the way after he left Ellington, he was really criticised, and it's suggested that his playing deteriorated. And yet when I listen to an album like the album when Ellington played with Louis Armstrong on Ellington's compositions, which Barney Bigard contributed to, I don't see this falling off of his work in any shape or form. And if you want a good example of that, then certainly listen to the Ellington Armstrong version of Drop Me Off in Harlem, where Barney, he puts in quite a sterling appearance. We can go through, which I don't intend to do this afternoon, let me say, we can go through a lot of the choices that Barney had an opportunity to shine, if you like, on his work. But what I do find very intriguing, and we had some exposure to this earlier, and hopefully more towards the end of the year with our CD, if you listen to the small group of Ellington, where Barney Bigard participated, things like the Jazzopators and things like that, in those tracks, Barney Bigard really comes to the fore in a way that somehow he never achieved, or found it difficult to achieve, when he played some of the standard tracks from that time. One of the intriguing things about Barney Bigard is that he never seems to get the opportunity to shine in what I call a microgroove background, i.e. when musicians are or were able to play more extended solos and more extended work than they did. The more you listen to Barney Bigard, again, a personal viewpoint, the more I do believe that he contributed far more to Ellington's music than we tend to regard. And especially, I think it's brought about by some very heavy criticisms. Leonard Feather didn't have a great deal of time for Barney Bigard, apparently, and this reflects in some of the comments he makes in some of his works. Okay, there are aspects of Feather's work, and I'm speaking of his written work, not his musical abilities, where you take them with a bit of a tongue-in-cheek approach. But I'm glad we're having the ability to think about Barney Bigard, if not listen to him. And I would strongly suggest that, given the opportunity, if you've got time, to expose yourselves a little more, not in the plural sense, but certainly in the audible sense, by listening to Barney Bigard.
Well, what you do when you're in your listening room by yourself is, of course, up to you.
Yes, of course, but we'll draw a veil over what you do when you listen to records.
Exactly.
If you don't mind.
You can see what I do. I dance around.
No.
So, one of my suggestions, not here particularly, but certainly one of my suggestions for Barney Bigard's work, and there ain't a great deal of Bigard available. He did some tracks for Black and White with Ivy Anderson, I think it was, after he left Ellington, or about the time he was leaving Ellington. But it doesn't crop up, well, apart from some New Orleans, what you might call traditional kind of work. And I have to say that my feelings there are they weren't likely to show him in the best light ever. Perhaps he wasn't exposed enough. But most certainly, listen to the Ellington Armstrong collaboration, because there is some great Barney Bigard on that record, and particularly I believe the track I mentioned, which was "Drop Me Off in Harlem." I'm sorry, Anthony, I interrupted.
No, I thought you just finished, and I thought I was just going to jump in there. No guarantee it's exactly the right version, but shall we hear that?
Okay, before you play it,
yes,
I'd just like to volunteer a quick chorus of Mood Indigo. I think that Barney recorded that with Ellington over the years.
It did.
And one of the things that I find so refreshing, and hopefully we'll hear it on this clip that we brought from a recording he did in 1977, is that really kind of what they call the shallow, which is the low end of the clarinet. And you get these really kind of eerie, almost sort of murky tone quality there, which it resonates in its own way. And it's so different than the middle of the instrument or the high end, or really high, where you get this kind of shrieky sound. Now, Mood Indigo, it's a self-explanatory title, but when you hear the clarinet play it, kind of not quite shallow, but low. You know, you get that whole mood of the song right off the bat. And then that second chorus of the piece, when it goes to a clarinet solo. You know, that really brings out that quality.
Yes.
And
Frank, how much of that feeling and style emanated from Sidney Bechet, do you think?
Well, it not only emanated from Bechet, which is probably the best influence, but many of the New Orleans clarinet players at the time, including Pee Wee Russell, who was not known. He was certainly known as a New Orleans player, but he is in a way because he really focused on bringing out the low part of the instrument,
right?
With a fairly fast vibrato, because in those days, even Lewis, what was his name? Lewis, you know, the great clarinet player that Woody Allen.
Lewis.
Huh?
George Lewis? No.
George Lewis, yeah.
George Lewis.
Wasn't he Woody Allen's favorite clarinet player? Yeah. Whatever that means. But I wasn't a huge fan of Lewis. I thought he had a kind of a squeaky, squawky tone.
Yeah.
But he was revered, and he also had some good visits to England. I think in his later years in the 50s, and the Stratophiles really, went crazy for him. But it's a real fast vibrato, which I don't particularly like, but it was really effective. People like Johnny Dodds, Darnell Howard, many of those, Johnny Mintz, maybe, Jimmy Noon, all those guys, Omar Simeon, all those lovely Southern Louisiana names, you know. Omar Simeon, what a great name. That was a strong feature of his playing. Now, the track, I hope Anthony's got it queued up, is called, it's a Clarinet Summit from 1977, and it was recorded in the Nice Jazz Festival in southern France. And as you can, well, we can't see the video, sadly, but maybe when UL wins the lottery and gets a huge boost of funds.
Oh, that's right.
We can get some special tech teams
some
to
extra
enable us.
Facilities, that's right.
But anyway, this is audio of this Clarinet Summit
Well, let's
gig.
play these two pieces
Summer.
segue, shall we?
No, let me just talk for a bit more, pal.
Okay.
It's going to
More
be Barney
fun.
Bigard. Shh, pipe down. Barney Bigard, Eddie Daniels, Bob Wilbur, and Tony Coe.
Wow.
And there's going to be a contest here, and the winner of which will win a free half a lager shandy at the next DESUK get together in about 2030 or so.
Yes.
And this is gonna the mystery clarinetist. There's actually 4 or 5 clarinetists, and there's one I don't remember. But Anthony, you might have the information on the track. Do you?
I probably do. We'll come back to that after we've heard it.
Anyway, they're gonna do. I know you're in a hurry. You want to feel, like you're doing something, which is fair enough. We're gonna hear Strayhorn's A Train, yeah, and I believe that Bigard takes a solo. I think he takes the first solo on this one. I'm sorry, but I don't remember the exact solo order. But all the clarinetists I just mentioned, Eddie Daniels, Bob Wilbur, and Tony Coe, and then a mystery clarinetist, are just stunning. But you'll hear Bigard's unique and very different approach to the solo. Unlike the other ones, he's not getting paid by the note, and it's just a stunning what the tone and the message he gives off. Probably in concert with what Mike was saying earlier about that big sound and lyricalness. Yeah.
Lyricalness. Yep.
Okay, go for it, Chief.
Lyricalicity. Okay, so we'll hit, as I say, these two pieces one after the other.
I'll just play whatever. Doesn't matter.
Drop me off in Harlem, yeah, good old Harlem. You have your fun under the Harlem sun, so drop me off in Harlem. There's Duke Ellington up in Harlem. He writes all his tunes in Harlem, and old Satchmo's still swinging way up in Harlem. All the cats are still up there, they're beating out those riffs. And Apollo, Puerto Rico, give you a great big lift. Yes, drop me off in Harlem. Yeah, man, beautiful Harlem. You get red beans and rice, it's very nice. Way up there in Harlem, that is.
Yes.
Excellent,
Barney
Frank.
Bigard with
Gosh.
the other clarinetist, Eddie Daniels, Bob Wilbur, Tony Coe, who did not solo on that last number, and Kenny DeVerne, the mystery clarinetist. And 1977 Nice Jazz Festival with Dick Hyman on piano and J.C. Hurd on drums, and a French bass player whose name I don't remember. But what a great compliment of clarinetist. And Barney Bigard was the first soloist you heard, and a distinctive one, to say the least. And in some people's ears, quite a refreshing one, because he was playing very much with a broad tone, very melodically, and with using plenty of space and not in a hurry to prove anything. So thank God we have this footage of Barney Bigard in 1977.
Amazing. Jack Sewing, or however that's pronounced. On
Jack
bass.
Serine,
No doubt. From
French bass player, very good player too.
From Dutchland. Oh, I don't know. Maybe France. I'm not sure. Anyway, right.
So there you go. That's great. What a
Oh, thank you for
track.
introducing us all to that.
Yeah.
Frank.
Yeah,
Lovely.
really my pleasure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, actually, it's just occurred to me that we've been paying our respects to these great clarinet players quite rightly, but I think we need to also just mention the fact that Duke kept them in his employ, because I think really even by the end of Bigard's career with Duke, clarinetists were thought of, I think, as a bit of an anachronism within big bands, weren't they? There was sort of, some people were questioning, why, Duke still had a clarinet player in the band, and of course he persisted right until the end. So that it's a sort of testament to Ellington's vision that he kept them as an integral part.
Yeah, he was one of the few band leaders, and I should say bands, that did keep the clarinet firmly entrenched in the band, the sound. And of course, a lot of people, when they see a clarinet in a big band nowadays, or even in a small band, as I've been that clarinetist on many occasions, they just think, oh, that's old music, that's the 40s. Well, we want to hear a modern big band,
They have to take
And
a
there's
picture.
this force of nature in New York guy called Scott Robinson, who plays the clarinet and the bass clarinet and loads of different instruments. And he's
Oh, the
really
bass
helped to
clarinet.
bring that back, because he plays in all kinds of really weird and wonderful modern groups. And it's extraordinary instrument. And it hasn't been as consistent
No,
as the trombones, trumpets, and saxophones in the history of big bands.
no, that's right. And when people, I was just going to say, creep up towards the front of the stage and take a picture of you holding your clarinet, of course it's largely just so that they can look it up on Google Images and see what it is, because they just don't know, do they, Frank?
This is a 1996 Yamaha clarinet, which I'm happy to say is a relatively new
Off camera.
part of my arsenal. I had a buffet clarinet for many 40 years.
All right.
I know it's hard to believe, because I was obviously about 2 years old when I got it. And this is a much better instrument for me. I will say that clarinets tend to wear out, unlike saxophones. Yeah. And my theory is because it's wood.
Yes, indeed.
And wood doesn't have the longevity and, if you like, durability of brass. That's my theory.
Did the buffet? Did the buffet?
And I got a good deal, and I was able to sell my buffet.
Oh, that's good.
So it was kind of a win-win situation.
Did the buffet clarinet go flat?
The buffet, it was a very appetizing clarinet. Let's put it that way. You get
So
it?
tasty piece of wood there.
It must have,
So-
it
so-
must
so
have been
what-
bigger. It must have
Sorry,
been
Mike.
bigger than you, Frank, when you first got it. Then, if you were
Actually,
only 3
when I
years
started
old.
playing clarinet, believe it or not,
Grow into it.
I was about 6 years old.
Really?
And I can still, I was quite young. And I couldn't put my hand over the bell. I know it seems silly, isn't it?
Amazing.
But it wasn't until I was right old age of 8 or 9 that I could, do that. So there you go.
Ah, gosh. But one of the people, just feeding into another track that we have, and something else that you'd like to talk about briefly, Frank, I think, who has kept the clarinet, or has brought it back really, helped to bring it back, is Ken Peplowski.
Yeah, Ken Peplowski is my age exactly. And he is just a stunning player. And I did actually bring one track of his, but the main thing is that he is sadly not well, but he's recovering. He's in treatment for cancer, but I believe he's still playing gigs and is able to cope somewhat. But extraordinary and a very popular face on the British jazz scene. I'm sure people have heard him in Britain or know that he comes through to play in Britain quite a bit up till COVID, and plays really fine sax, alto and tenor sax as well. And has recorded many recordings, CDs on the Concord label, and recorded several with the great Charlie Bird, the guitarist who classical guitarist who recorded with Stan Getz in the early 60s and started the Bossa Nova craze. And Kenny Peplowski, wonderful clarinetist and overall musician. Yeah.
Shall we hear this track?
Please.
the Royal Garden Blues. Right, King Poplawski, Frank.
Well, just quickly, because we have the track
Yes.
to play. That was recorded in 1997 in New York from a Ken Poplawski CD called A Good Read,
Good title.
R-E-E-D. And it was Ken with the Lauren Schoenberg Big Band in New York. Lauren Schoenberg, of course, quite a highly respected expert on Ellington, and on a previous showing of Uptown Lockdown.
Gosh, decades ago, yes.
Yeah, it feels like decades ago.
Hi, Lauren.
And
if you happen
just
to
a
catch the
fantastic band, and a great recreation of Ellington's earlier chart, Royal Garden Blues, which was written by a famous New Orleans composer called Clarence Williams, who has probably got credit for a lot of tunes, one of which is Baby, Won't You Please Come Home. Anyway, that was just a fantastic recreation of one of the great charts of Ellington, and using a lot of dissonance and harmonies in the 30s, presumably when he wrote this piece, that weren't the norm in those days. And of course, the really full-throated swinging clarinet of Ken Poplawski. So, Gareth.
Yeah, we were going to do a
yes. So let's just
roundup, weren't we? Of what?
So if you're
we're up to. Shall I talk about Blue Light now then?
If you're interested, well, you could do. Go on then, Gareth. Go on.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thanks for I'm just plugging the next edition of Blue Light that's going to be in all good newsagents in September, hopefully.
Even ones in Hackney?
Especially the ones in Hackney. It'll be on one shelf in Hackney anyway, at least. This is the most recent one that should be with DESUK members. The next one is due. I'm just working on it at the moment. It's due to be out in September. I'm hoping for it to be similarly large edition. Again, there's lots of good material. Some supplied by Ian and Frank, some really interesting reviews written by you, so thanks very much for those. But two of the longer pieces in there are actually about Carnegie Hall concerts. One by Roger Boys, which is about the 1948 concert, which I was a bit less familiar with, and one by Fred Gluckstein about the 1943 concerts. So it's interesting just to sort of read those along. It's been interesting to read those alongside one another and compare and contrast. Really, the circuit, because 43, of course, was the first concert. By 48, it'd become a tradition with Ellington to perform there at around Christmas or the New Year. And he was presenting work, important new works there, beginning in 43 with black, brown, and beige. And actually, something I didn't realise is that he was performing there up right until the end. Into sort of 72 was possibly his last appearance. But by then, he was, I think, sort of hitched to Norman Granz, and he was doing concerts with Ella Fitzgerald, and they weren't quite of the nature as they were in the 40s.
Well, what's interesting about those two, in fact, three concerts, 43 ones and 48, is that they occurred during hiatuses in studio recordings, or at least commercial records.
Yes, yeah. And the two recordings that I've selected are from those two concerts. The first is Backheath from 43. By this time, actually, it's Chauncey Horton is in the band on clarinet, because I think Big Ard had left in about 42, and that's a piece of Exotica composed by who was the trombonist? But Dwan Tizol, wasn't it? Yeah, composed that. And it's for years I thought it was the title was an exotic location, but just consulting my notes here, apparently, according to Eric Townley's book Tell Your Story, the title, far from being an exotic place name, is simply made up from the initial letters of, I'll use the American pronunciation here, Big Ass Cock Eye Floy Floy, which translated into English is Big Ass Cock-Eyed Double Talk. So I think that's some sort of lingo from within the band. It's like an in joke from within the band. So there's a slightly risque sort of title going on there. But the actual piece itself, this version, is a lot longer than the studio version, and it gives Ray Nance a chance to really sort of let rip on the violin. And the second piece from 48 is How High the Moon. Ben Webster's back in the fold again briefly, I think, and that is as Roger says in his article, that piece is sort of turned into a vehicle for him to show his talents on, because it was a standard that was used by favourite of the beboppers, wasn't it? I think.
Oh yes, indeed. Yes.
Yes. So I'm look forward to hearing those pieces, and particularly to the next Blue Light.
Indeed. Let me just step in here and say thanks to everybody for being here. Frank may have to disappear quite soon because he's got a work engagement. Before we do that, we know that you're editing Blue Light, which is the journal magazine of the Duke Ellington Society UK, available in probably no good bookshops. There aren't any good books, I don't know, maybe, or newsagents, sorry, whatever it was you said. But certainly available if you subscribe to our society, become a member. I know it sounds like a big commitment, but it's not that big really. Just sign up, give us, I think it's £25 a year, and you'll get a copy of Blue Light, which is a mag. I mean, how is this 96 pages? No, it's not. Is it 72? 48?
Only 48.
Only 48 this time, right. So 48-page magazine. The last one was 48, wasn't it? So 3 times a year we send these out to people, and wonderful work. It would be great if more people could read them, frankly. It would be brilliant. So please do consider joining the Society if you're not already a member. So that's something that you do, one of the things that you do. Let's just quickly go through people here. Mike, you have a radio show.
Yes, it goes out every week, 1 o'clock on Tuesdays, 2-hour show. It's on. It's called Swing Time on the radio station Sheffield Live 93.2 FM. It's available Sheffield live on the web, and there are podcasts available for the previous 12 to 20 weeks if you care to listen to them.
That's an extraordinary
not
amount
always
of work.
Duke Ellington, but it just put in an appearance from time to time. And I might add, in pursuit of the radio station, there are 2 other jazz programs on Sheffield Live 93.2.
Gosh. One
on a Sunday morning at 9 o'clock called Spinning Jazz, and one at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning called In the Moment. And my compatriot and friend and fellow committee member, Frank Griffith, has appeared on our show, and I'm hoping that in the not so distant future he'll be giving yet a further exposition of jazz, not necessarily Ellington, but certainly of jazz music. And
Swing
that's
Time.
it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Mike. So Swing Time on Sheffield Live, available on the net if you're not happening to be just around Sheffield. There, Frank, you also have a radio program.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I have 2 shows, one of which, to make it easy, they're both called the Jazz Cavern.
Right.
The weekly version is on Thursdays at 9 p.m. on mykindofmusic24radio.com. And it's, well, you can't really see it.
Oh,
Too
hang
small,
on.
but I just happen to have this handy.
All right.
And then that's on several times a week. If you
Miss it on the Thursdays.
just
Right.
go on to my kind of music.
24.
My kind of music 24 the number. You can find more about that. And I also have a monthly show in Liverpool. It's on a station called Liverpool Community Radio. Just Google Liverpool Community Radio, and it plays several times a week.
Wow.
And I have guests. It's an actual studio, which is really
Amazing.
nice. So
I can
I
only
get
imagine.
to interview people and talk about what's happening in the Northwest. And I'm playing around the Northwest quite a bit. However, not just the Northwest. As a matter of fact, I've got a concert coming up in September at a place called the Dorchester Corn Exchange,
Oh, yes.
which is in Dorchester, strangely enough.
Wow.
And it's on the 17th of September. And it's going to be my group, a small group with a singer. And we're going to be doing jazz interpretations of Burt Bacharach, who I understand was a big fan of Ellington. And you can find all that information on my website, which is just frankgriffith.co.uk, myname.co.uk. So we hope to see you wherever you are.
But what's the FM frequency of the community radio station?
The community radio station is on 106.7 FM.
On the analog FM radio. Wow, amazing.
Yeah, the good old wireless. So
Lovely.
that's, as I say, that shows up several times a week. They do a lot of catch up on it. So
Super.
none of my radio shows, sadly, are on a SoundCloud or a catch up option. Many radio stations do have, as Mike's show does, where you can dial it up whenever you want.
Yes, and our colleague Brian Priestley's show over in Ireland is available online and in catch-up form, but he can tell you about that when he's
if you don't
on
mind,
next.
Anthony, please do remind the listeners, whatever, as to where they can access this program as well.
On YouTube at Uptown Lockdown.
Yep.
That's where we live.
And Facebook as well.
And Ian, well, I can find the society there, yes, and links to the YouTube channel. And of course, we've got a Discord channel as well. I haven't actually been looking on that. I don't know if anybody's commented anything. But yes, all of that can be found at our website, of course, dukeellington.org.uk. I might put the address up if I can fiddle around and do that when we finish. But anyway, Ian, you don't have a radio programme, do you?
I don't know.
Not yet. Why is that?
I labour away in complete obscurity.
But you do. You do have a blog. Whatever that is.
Yeah, I think the social media revolution has left me high and dry. I don't think I'm going to move on to TikTok anytime soon. So it's probably the last blog standing. It's probably been on there about 14 years, I think. So there are bits and pieces from the internet I found, eBay auctions I couldn't afford, and that kind of thing, and good links to important websites.
Sure.
So that's just ellingtonlive.blogspot.com.
Wow.
As long as Google allows these things to continue freely.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. Ian. So, Gareth, right. Shall we play these two Carnegie Hall pieces?
Please do. Yeah.
Backheath from 1943. I'm so sorry. Is that the January 1943? It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then also How High the Moon from 1948.
And now comes our valve trombonist, Juan Tisol, and Ray Nance on violin in the solo roles of Backheath. I forgot to mention that Teasdale is also the composer. Teasdale. Thank you. We have as an extra added attraction, it's my pleasure to present one of the greatest, one of the most imitated tenor saxophonists, Ben Webster.
Webster. Ian Webster.
That was first of all Backy from 1943 and Carnegie Hall, and second, running into that, was How High the Moon, and from 1948 in Carnegie Hall, and two really nice examples there of how a live version can allow the soloist to really stretch out. The first one being Ray Nance, and the second being Ben Webster. And I think for the first recording, we were talking about clarinetists. On the first recording, by then Chauncey Horton had taken over, and then the second one was early into Jimmy Hamilton's career. Not that they were featured on those, but yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So fortunate to have these recordings. I'm just imagining the engineers cutting into their lacquers at Carnegie Hall, I guess, or possibly somewhere out of the studio. I don't know exactly. But such important things to have recorded there. Quite remarkable, considering these things were, before the tape era. So it wasn't just a matter of, sticking a machine on to run for an hour or whatever. I'm very fortunate to have these concerts recorded. So Gareth, thanks so much for bringing those along.
Thank you.
Ian, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Michael, and also Frank, who's gone now. He's gone to get gone to work. He's going to work, and so we'll be back with our with our ordinarily scheduled monthly program with Brian Priestley, hopefully on the 29th or thereabouts of this month, and we've got at least a couple more of those to do. If people would like to donate to Uptown Lockdown specifically, then please go to paypal.me/Uptown Lockdown and feel free to make a donation. Thank you so much for listening. I thought, since I dug it out, we'd end with the where can I see this? There we go. Got a window over the other window here. But from this set of previously unissued recordings that came out in around 1984 here on French CBS, made in Holland, I dug out the alternative take of The Swinger's Jump, which we heard earlier. And with that then, we will say goodnight. Just have to do that, and then there we go, and goodbye.
Uptown.